If you've ever had the experience of feeling something clearly and then almost immediately losing your footing with it, starting to question it, soften it, or move away from it, it can feel like something isn't working, like your clarity wasn't real or didn't hold. What's usually happening is much simpler than that. Your intuition doesn't come through in just one way. And when those different ways show up together, they can blur into each other in a way that's difficult to sort through in the moment. There are a few primary ways this tends to show up. Most people have access to more than one, but there's usually a sequence. Something arrives first, and then the other layers begin to form around it. For some people, intuition shows up in the body first. It's often immediate and specific. A shift in tension, a sense of contraction, or a kind of openness that wasn't there a moment before. You might agree to something and feel it right away, not as a thought, but as a change in your body. There can be a quiet sense of resistance or lack of it. At that point, nothing needs to be explained. It's simply registered. What tends to happen next is more subtle. Your attention moves towards making sense of it. You begin to interpret the feeling, place it in context, compare it to what you think you should be doing. And as that process unfolds, the original response becomes less distinct. It doesn't disappear, it just becomes less central. By the time a decision is made, what you're working with often has more to do with the explanation than the initial response. For others, intuition shows up through awareness of other people. You notice shifts in tone or a change in how something is being said. You can feel when something isn't fully aligned, even if everything sounds reasonable on the surface. This kind of awareness tends to be immediate as well. You register it before you've had time to think about it. Then your attention begins to move outward. You start taking the other person into account. You consider their perspective, their situation, what might be influencing them. And in doing that, your own perception becomes one part of a larger picture rather than the center of it. The original noticing is still there, but it's now surrounded by interpretation, context, and adjustment. So what began as a clear read turns into something you're managing rather than something you're following. Some people experience intuition through thought. Clarity shows up as understanding. You can see how something is structured, how it's likely to unfold, where it's heading. There's a moment where it all fits together and the direction feels obvious. Then the process continues. You revisit it. You look at it again from a different angle. You start testing it, refining it, adding detail. The clarity doesn't vanish. It gets layered. And as more layers are added, the original insight becomes harder to isolate. What remains is a more complex version of what was initially simple. So instead of working from the first clear understanding, you're now working with everything that's been built around it. And then there's direct knowing. This tends to be the most straightforward and, at the same time, the easiest to move away from. There's a sense of direction that arrives without steps. No build-up, no visible reasoning, just a clear sense of what fits or doesn't. Because there's nothing attached to it, no explanation or structure, it can feel difficult to hold on to. The next move is often to look for something to support it. So you start searching for reasons or checking it against what makes sense externally. And as that happens, your attention shifts away from the knowing itself and towards whether it can be justified. At a certain point, the focus is no longer on what was initially clear, but on whether it can be supported. And that shift changes how it's experienced. Most people aren't working with just one of these. There's usually a primary way your intuition comes through, and then other inputs that follow. When they're not separated, they blend together. That's where the confusion tends to start. I put together a quiz to help you see how this works for you specifically. What tends to show up first, what comes in after, and how they interact. I've linked it below. Once you can see your pattern more clearly, the experience starts to organize.